Hi, it's Sunday morning, and it's Andy and Alan with you, Return to Healing. And if you haven't read our book, I can't tell you, Alan, how many people asked me questions over the last few weeks. And I said, well, it's in my book. You could just get the book. It's right in there. So, a lot of things I say are all documented. We got the sources, everything else is in there. So read the book. Um,
Well,
but
we're selling some books, Andy. I sign like two or three a week. We
well,
should
that's
speak to the
good.
publisher to get that, $1 million we're being owed.
Then we could really give things back to everybody. That'll be great. So we're talking about we're two schmuck doctors, Alan and I, and we're what we call dinosaurs. We're basically extinct. The meteor's already hit, and people like us don't exist anymore. And certainly no one is going into what we do. We have kids in medical school, they're not doing it. And they laugh even when I bring it up. I said, anyone doing it? Ha 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 ha, Dad, that's pretty funny. But that's what I get because it's tough what we do, and we get basically stepped on constantly every day. Newest thing, Alan, is that the deductibles have gone up, so we're basically getting paid by nobody right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, the month of January, you get very poor. Sometimes I have to take a loan from my personal account to pay the
I
staff.
did. I loaned the bank from my personal account, but even so, deductibles have gotten so big now that it's going to take two visits now to pay them off. So and we're only good at about 80% collections with these because people just don't pay you. So
Yep.
it's quite the system. Anyway,
Well, the
we're
doctor's
so
rich. Why should they be paid?
oh, the rich doctor, right? Me and you were always playing golf, right? In
I
the
had I
summer.
had a patient yesterday, Andy. She said, "It's the first time in my life I've been on the blacklist." I was like, "What happened? Your office wouldn't release an appointment if I didn't make a payment."
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Because they don't understand. I have people all the time. They want to basically have free appointments or, let's talk about dad. They call it 8 o'clock at night. Let's talk about dad. I got a couple hours. So, it's just like they have no idea, right? They just want free stuff. And that's what the concierge people do. But we're not, we're schmucks. So we're just
Yeah.
doing our thing because we don't believe in charging people above and beyond. And we take care of people who can't pay anyway. I take care of people who left concierge practice because they couldn't afford them. So, that's the way it goes. So we are also being, in the primary care world, because none of us exist, a lot of nurse practitioners taking over what we did, but also a lot of these TV doctors. And that's what we wanted to talk about today. And everyone has seen this. Hims and Hers is probably the biggest one that you see, and they're willing to sell you stuff that your doctor may or may not give you, mostly stuff for vanity. I call them vanity doctors.
hmm
This is ED, erectile dysfunction, hair loss, weight loss, that kind of stuff. And they actually repackage their own drugs. So you get the visit you pay for, and then you got to buy the drugs from them as well. That is repackaged, and you wonder just what exactly you're getting. But and yeah, I also wonder, Alan, what, just to throw this at you, because I do a lot of reading on the GLP-1s because frankly, they scare me to death because I call them cancer in a pill, in a shot, because they cause muscle destruction and they're ketosis and all these other things that we don't like. And an article came out just 2 days ago from England, showing hundreds of people are dying of acute pancreatitis from these drugs.
Yep.
So that's just usually you don't see this level of side effect this early in a drug's release because most of them are longer term destruction and also the drug companies are good at hiding this. So I don't know what these companies do when someone has a horrible reaction because obviously they can't take care of them then. What do they do? Just give them to us and we deal with the side effects.
So, with cancer, Andy, we all know that, many cancers could take 10, 20, 30 years to develop. So we're not going to know for years. We might not even know in our lifetime, you know, truly how much damage these drugs do. So, they got to be used in caution. There are some really morbidly obese people out there that, losing a couple 100 pounds could save their life.
Absolutely.
It's either surgery or that. But the people that are doing it, for vanity and stuff like that, or they're, 10, 15 pounds overweight, it's utterly absurd. I mean, the data shows you take the shots, you lose the weight, you go off the shots, you gain the weight. So you're going to take this forever, and who knows what the long-term effects is. But I agree with you. There's a lot of things going against us in primary care, whether it's financial or access or insurance company denials, whatever it may be. But this online stuff, I think, is extremely dangerous. Okay. And there's different forms of this online from, what you said, Andy, about hims and hers. And I started investigating, and about a year ago, I went on to one of these things just for the heck of it, can I get some erectile dysfunction drugs, see what they're asking? And literally, these companies ask like two or three questions, and then like a minute later, it comes back, you've been approved.
Mm.
Now, it's probably some AI algorithm that reviews the five or six questions, and then they say you've been seen by a medical practitioner because you can't prescribe without a license. So people are prescribing drugs, doctors, for people they've never seen. And to me, it's extremely dangerous. So last night, and I talked about this to you last week, Andy, after our talk. One of these is called the Wellness Center. I just started seeing it come out now, and it's a bunch of docs. And one of them is this famous TV doc, Dr. Drew Pinsky. So I looked at the guy and, seemed pretty decent doc, internist with specialization in addiction medicine. And I think he does a lot of these talks about addiction and psychology and things like that. Seems reasonable when I've seen him on TV. They have a bunch of products. They have different kits. I think I went online, they have 8 or 10 kits. But the one there's two that get me the most. The one that gets me the most is like their emergency medicine kit. Okay. And in this emergency medicine kit comes instructions and comes with about 15 different antibiotics for everything. Okay. And it gives you a list. Like if you have a sore throat, take amoxicillin. If you have, you think you have COVID, take ivermectin. There's literally ivermectin in
Oh, they
there.
have ivermectin
Yeah.
now? It's come back.
And so you look at this stuff and you say, oh my God, like if I was practicing this non-evidence-based medicine and I gave 20 antibiotics to my patient in a kit and said, read what you want, I would say, oh my God, this is medical malpractice. This is not medical evidence-based medicine. This is simply wrong. And it's wrong. And to go on and get the kit, you simply need to say you're a certain age, you don't have certain allergies to any of the medicine in there. Like it asks you, are you allergic to any of these meds in there? And it's like $500 for a kit. With the antibiotics that's in there is probably worth $50 for the whole thing because it's all generic stuff.
So
And
do they have you officially see a doctor too? Because I guess they have to, right? To
it's all done by questionnaires and stuff like that.
but the
So
doctor has to say that they saw you
and the
prescribe.
commercial says, why sit online, in an urgent care center, or why go to your doctor? Like they're telling people not to go to doctors. So the young people in this country, they're either going to urgent care centers or they're getting online stuff, and they are not getting the primary medical care that they need, what's going to truly save their lives. They're not getting any education on exercise and nutrition, the lifestyle medicine we spend so much of our day talking about. They're not getting any of the preventive tests that are actually evidence-based. I know we know a lot are not, but the ones that are, I mean, they're not getting access to this. And, they're asking them, has your blood pressure been checked? They just have to say yes. Like they don't even know what their blood pressure is. But I guess that's how they protect themselves with the questionnaires and they keep the questionnaires. So if someone drops dead, they're going to say, well, this person told me they have no medical problems. They don't take any medicine. They're not allergic to anything. And they died after one of my medications because they didn't go see a doctor and they actually had meningitis or pneumonia. It actually says there's a drug for pneumonia. Like
Wow.
they say, don't go to the doctor for pneumonia. Like who's checking their vital signs, their heart rate, their, oxygen saturation, simple tools. It's freaking insane what's going on TV right now.
And
It's
you know,
it's worse than the drug company ads.
it's worse than the drug company ads because the drug company ads don't actually give you the drugs, right? They just are trying to hypnotize doctors into doing it, which doctors are very hypnotizable. But two things about what you said, and one of them I'll challenge you. Not really, because you'll probably agree. A lot of people, a lot of young people, even a lot of middle-aged people, young people like us and middle-aged people too, simply hate the medical system. And when you're talking about them advertising, don't stand in line, don't do this, they're like, yeah, last time I went to urgent care, I was in line for an hour. And yeah, I call these primary cares, but they're not taking any new patients. And the ones that do have like an 8 month waiting list, and even to get an appointment, it's going to take forever because Alan, there are none of us left. We don't exist anymore. So these guys are preying on the fact that there's this primary care shortage. And rather than address the shortage and address some of the problems in primary care, these guys don't want to fix the problem. And I know many people who do things like this, who go into this thinking they're saving the world. Um, so we know that this is a response to a problem in medicine and they're exploiting it. And the second thing I would say is like we have a problem with giving too many antibiotics already in this country. You come to me or you with a cold or cough, we might say, don't worry, take some chicken soup, do this. If this happens, do this. We have follow up. They can get in touch with us, try to avoid the antibiotics. If there's a problem with the antibiotics, we could react. So these places don't do that. They're just giving out all this medicine, whether it's their version of Ozempic or the antidepressants. A lot of psychiatric groups giving out antidepressants, antipsychotics, and these antibiotics. And yeah, they don't know what's going on with the patient, right? This is exactly the opposite of Osler's call to actually get to know the patient. What we were talking about before we got on, Alan and I, it was about how we love relationship medicine. To us, medicine is about developing relationships and getting to know our patients so well that when they do get sick, we have a good sense of what to do. We understand how they talk. We understand what they need. Oh, they always say they have sinusitis every month, and we know how to deal with it now. But these places don't. They don't care. They want to sell this product. That's all they care about. So it is incredibly dangerous, and it takes us kind of backwards to the pre-scientific era when the patent medicine salesmen were pushing these carts and promising the world from all their medicines. And that's what we were trying to get away from. We're right back there, Alan. It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary and more are coming out. I don't watch TV a lot, but every night I like to watch the news for a few minutes. So when a patient asks me a question about what's going on in the world, I know something,
That's why I read People magazine, Alan.
so
That's
that's an evidence-based journal as well.
it's better, more evidence based than New England Journal. But yes, go ahead.
Another one came out I saw on TV this week. The home health company, Hone Health Company, they specialize in testosterone, weight loss, okay, sex therapy, hormones, sex therapy drugs, and anti-aging products. So these are the things that are coming out. And I'm looking like anti-aging, they're giving this to like elderly people. And like testosterone, most of the testosterone drugs, when I prescribe them, rarely, but I do once in a while, someone's truly deficient and can't get out of the bed in the morning because
Right.
their testosterone is in the toilet. And you look at these people and like they could be dangerous. The long-term effects are unknown, the cardiovascular effects are unknown, and we have to go through this whole process of getting it approved by the insurance companies because they're expensive. So these companies, I think, are just using online algorithms that they know exactly what to say and they lie to get the drugs approved because they're not even seeing these freaking people. It's unbelievable.
Well, a lot of them, I know Hims and Hers does this. A lot of them make their own drugs, and so the approval process is irrelevant to them because they're selling you their drugs. To you, for you
Yes.
to use this company, you have to get the drugs from them. The drugs come from their lab. God knows what they are. Going to the weight loss drugs, this is a big business, $50 billion a year, which is outrageous. But Alan and I were talking about this before we got on. There's clearly going to be short-term and long-term consequences to these drugs, and they're not for everybody. And you really need to go through that with people. A recent article showed that hundreds are dying of pancreatitis from these drugs, dying from pancreatitis. So that's just tip of the iceberg. Eye disease, muscle wasting, fatigue, bowel paralysis. I go on and on with the list of potential problems, and this is just now. It could get worse. And you wonder if these companies talk about this at all. Or they say, "Oh, you're overweight. Yeah, your BMI is above 25, which is like what every NBA basketball player's BMI is, and you want to lose a little weight for your daughter's wedding, or you just want to keep up with the other people in your tennis group, we'll give you this drug. And they don't. So I
Well,
always wonder like what their liability is. And secondly, who takes care of the mess? And they give testosterone or other things that can have serious consequences. What do they call us at that point? And say, well, I'm in trouble at that point. But I don't know what happens. We're creating, this monster and that the other thing which we talk about a lot is the overprescribing in general. These people, their whole modus operandi is to overprescribe. There's not a drug that will not help you. Oh, you probably call about weight loss and they say, well, you sound a little depressed too. We got these drugs and I can put you on this. And I see your hair is not too good. We got stuff for that. You don't watch much TV, but there's a show called, I think it's called Beauty on TV. Ever hear of this?
nope.
So it's they these doctors come out with a shot that makes you more beautiful. It makes you into a good looking person. And so all these people are getting these shots, and all of a sudden some of their heads start exploding. And but the company covers all this over. It just, it's paying off enough people that it could still, and some people who know the head might explode still want the shot. They want to look good. I think this is like a parody on the whole Ozempic craze, but it could be a parody on the whole medical system that leads anti-aging nonsense. That we could give hormones and vitamins and other things to stop people from aging. There's this one anti-aging doctor. I'm not going to say who he is, but he writes books, give podcasts, all this stuff. And he says, "Look at me, I do all this stuff." The guy's my age, he looks terrible. He's not looking that good, but he says, "Well, I could still go on a bicycle machine." Yeah, I got 90-year-olds on a bicycle machine because they eat well and they take care of themselves. So it's this turning aging, turning obesity, turning all these things into treatable medical conditions that you need drugs for. That's what these companies are
Yeah.
doing. They're
So
preying on
it's just a shame because we know that upwards of half the drugs that are legitimately prescribed are not necessary or over treatment for conditions that we made up. So now you add in, we want to prescribe because that's how we're making the money. And these drugs are not vetted. Like I can't even understand. Maybe you could answer this for us, Andy, because I don't know how the FDA, one, and number two, how the pharmaceutical companies who people are, making compounds of their drugs that are patented are allowing them to do it. I know during COVID there was exemptions to the patent rule because there was shortage of lots of drugs, but I don't know how they do that. So maybe you can answer that one for me. And the other thing is they're not going into detail of anything, but what they do, I think, to protect themselves is they have you sign this 25-page document that they said they read with all the side effects and that, you agree to do this and you agree to do that and you're being honest with us that, you have no medical problems and you're healthy and all this before we prescribe. It's insane. They could say whatever they want because they're not being regulated at all. And the other thing is like the companies that are doing the vitamins, I don't know if we got into that in any of our podcasts, but the vitamins and the supplements, but you know, you take something like, Prevagen and Revive, like
it.
they're making billions of freaking dollars, and where's the evidence for them?
No, there's no evidence. You know what the evidence is for these because the FDA has different rules for the over-the-counter stuff. You get 10 of your friends together and give them the drug and say, "So how's your brain doing?" "Yeah, I'm thinking a lot better now." They say 8 out of 10 people in a controlled study. That's all they need to do. And Prevagen did that. And there was actually a class action lawsuit against Prevagen, and they won the lawsuit because they said because what the judge said is, well, over the counters don't have to do any more than what Prevagen did. Yeah, over the counters could say it'll grow wings and you could fly around and be a fairy, and that's fine. You could say whatever you want. So this over-the-counter craze is scary. You also don't know what's in the pills. From one pill to the next, there's no consistency. So as bad as drugs are, these are actually scarier in a lot of ways because they're totally unregulated and you don't know what you're getting.
And there's a lot of interactions with this stuff, with the things we do prescribe. And a lot of the patients don't tell their doctor because they're embarrassed, that I'm taking a bag full. Like every once in a while, I'm sure you've had this too. Once I had someone come in with one of those shopping carts that the little old ladies use that
Yeah.
roll around, and it was filled with a bag. There was like 50 bottles in there. It was like 50 bottles. Can you tell me if all these are safe for me? I said, there's too
Exactly.
many. Don't take them. It's
Yeah,
like,
that happens to me a lot, and I'm just shocked at what I see these people taking. And some of them, a lot of them are from these online people. These, these, these push cart, patent medicine salesmen who promise, who claim they're longevity doctors. A lot of them are MDs who are doing this. A lot of them have been in in university systems before, and now they see a opportunity to make a lot of money because people don't want to age, people don't want to be overweight, people don't want to be bald, and people don't want to work at their health. So they're gonna give them all these supplements, and they sell again. These people sell you their product. It's the same thing. You have no idea. You're talking about the FDA. The FDA is first of all, with this stuff, doesn't really care. It never goes after supplements. For these other drugs, I looked into this for the Hims and Hers. How are they making their own Ozempic product?
right,
And
exactly.
how is it approved by the FDA? Apparently, uh, from what I saw, the FDA has if it's similar enough clause that it can pass. If it's similar enough to something we already approved, then you could get this passed with minimal. It's a minimal process. It's a and this book I think I recommended before called No More Tears by New York Times journalist Gardner Harris came out last year. Big book. Talks about Johnson and Johnson, but and how they basically killed more people than any war that we've ever been in, with the full complicity of doctors. This guy is very down on the doctors, as you and I are, Alan, who are just often stooges to these claims, and they just give out whatever new medicine comes. But he talked a lot about the FDA approval process, how it is bought off by companies. I'm sure Hims and Hers gave their money that they need to give. But the process itself, especially with copycat drugs, which is what these are, and copycat
Mhm.
means the drug's out and we're going to just basically create another drug that's almost the same. That the approval process is not rigorous at all for those. And look, under the current FDA, and this is nothing new, but they've cut back a lot of money from the approval process. And you know who pays for the approval process are the companies themselves. So if Johnson& Johnson wants a drug approved, Johnson& Johnson pays the cost of the approval process. So I'm sure Hims and Hers is doing the same thing. And it's easy to get things by the FDA, unfortunately. We have a sieve of an FDA. And if you pay them enough money, if you have the right people, you're going to get things through. But the copycat process is easy. So that's why none of these companies are creating new drugs. They're creating copycat versions. Look, I don't know if you've seen the ad from Serena Williams on her weight loss drug,
Yep.
but her husband owns that company. So the drug she's pushing is owned by her husband. So why does Serena Williams need a weight loss drug? She should be sitting there saying, I've been exercising my whole life. I've been eating well. This is great. This is what I do. I'm healthy. Um, but no, she wants to sell a product, and she's again preying on people who A, don't like the medical system, and B, don't like what they look like, which is often the case with these drugs. That's why I call them vanity drugs. Most of them are exactly that.
Exactly.
So we're stuck with, back in the day in the 1850s, there was this alternative medical thing called Thomsonianism from a guy up in New England. And he said, you know what, you never have to see a doctor. Everyone could have their own pharmacology in their backyard. They could grow the right plants. I'll sell you the plants and you could make them and make your own drugs. This is not a new concept of this idea of, you could do it yourself. You don't have to see us, and we're going to sell you this stuff. And, it is as scary as the medical system is. This aspect of it, which I'm sure is increasing the cost of care, um, is going to be good for the medical system because it's going to make a lot of sick people who are going to enter the medical system, and that's how the medical system makes money. It's a sick relationship I think the system has to these companies.
Look, so Andy, this is just another example of a dysfunctional system. You know, no primary care base, go to any specialist you want, buy any drug online that you want, and forget about, the basics of health. The basics of health being, it's not about taking a shot, it's about eating healthy, it's about exercising, it's about all that. And, it is about, I lost 50 pounds last year over the year. How did I do it? Everybody said, "Oh, you're taking Ozempic, right?" I said, "I would not take that crap." I was like, my son was getting married. I wanted to look good for the wedding. I have a tuxedo that I didn't fit into. And I said, I got 6 months to lose the weight. And what did I do? I didn't eat carbs. We know carbs are our enemy. Okay. I didn't eat them. And in the time I lost the 50 pounds in 6 months by exercising, eating healthy, and no drug. It's insane. So we're telling people don't bother to eat healthy. Go to freaking McDonald's every day and take your Ozempic, and you'll still lose some weight and get sick at the same time. And maybe the fat from the McDonald's will give you pancreatitis along with the Ozempic. So you'll have a double up of it. But
Double
it's
whammy.
just like when you think about the common sense, there is no common sense in our approach to medical care in this country. None.
No,
It,
it's
it's
I always tell people that, the way the medical system works is to scare you and then to offer you salvation. And the salvation doesn't work, but I could show people studies that say it doesn't work or that there are major side effects, but then the salvation doctors come in and say, that how rare that is. You think it's good the way you look, don't you want to look better? It's going to be healthier. And by the way, weight loss we always think of as making you healthy, but it doesn't make you healthy if you do it the wrong way. I always say cancer causes weight loss, but that doesn't mean you're healthy.
yeah,
So that we knew this about the Atkins diet, right? It eliminated all fruits and vegetables and anything good. And yeah, it put you in what's called a ketotic state. And in the ketotic state, which you create these ketones, which are kind of poisonous, we don't like that. They also tear up your muscles. And that's what the new drugs are doing too. So it's not like weight loss is necessarily healthy, but everyone's been given this lesson that we can treat everything. We can, as Norton Hadler, the wonderful doctor from North Carolina, said, we now think age is a disease that can be treated. And that's what's going on, and that's who they're preying on. But I know
yeah.
people who are 25 years old taking these drugs. So it's not just age. They just want to look a certain way. So yeah, it's scary. And yes, it's part of the whole dysfunctional system that the only way we're going to fix it, and we could talk about this later, but there are people who have put palpable solutions in place. One of which was to cut 2% from specialist procedure costs and transfer it to primary care.
That's
That
what they
came out
need.
of the current administration, believe it or not, the not Trump, but Medicare, the current Medicare,
Hmm.
and it got rejected in Congress.
Yeah.
Lobbying groups from
American
cardiology,
College of
radiology,
Cardiology,
yeah,
American
they all
College of
lobbied it down.
Physicians. That's it.
So the second one was to create 400 new residency slots only in psychiatry and family practice.
Hmm.
And whether that's going to pass is dubious because again, they're pushing back because they don't want to see this. If you have too many primary care, it's bad for the specialists, and
Yep.
they know that. So yeah, the dysfunction start is at so many different levels that I always say, Alan, me and you, we could help people in our microenvironment, but changing the system when so many people are making so much money and promising them salvation is really hard to do, especially when everyone's being bought off to promote this. It's tough. So I think to the patients listening, you got to find a doctor who's willing to take care of you in their microenvironment, apart from all these scam artists who are trying to sell you
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
Someone you trust and have a relationship with, and that's what it's all
It's
about.
so again, I say everything about what I do is about relationships, communication. Those two things lead to trust. And when a patient trusts you to do the right thing for you, they're going to listen to you. They do. And you can't have that if you don't have a continuity relationship. The other last point I wanted to make was I don't know about in Maryland, Andy, but in New York, it's illegal to die from aging. Okay. You can't put on someone's death certificate
Oh,
that they were just old. Like
we
you're not
can't
allowed to
either.
do
No,
that. You
no.
have to you have to make something up. Like when I have a patient that, I get a call, your patient's 96 years old. He died at home this morning. What's the cause of death? I mean, like they were 96. Like it's
Exactly.
not allowed. It's illegal.
It's illegal in my state too. And I always say, yeah, people say, dementia is the fifth leading cause of death. I said, yeah, because I write it on all the death certificates because I
Right.
don't know what killed them. So that'll pass muster. I know it didn't kill them, but they had it, so I could write it down.
Well, that and cardiopulmonary
Yeah,
arrest is the
I
cause
do
because
that too.
everybody goes into cardiac arrest when they die. It's
When they
it's
died. So
it's
exactly.
ludicrous. You
So
can't put what's truly there.
no, you're not allowed to say aging because you're not allowed to die from aging. So that's our society that we're in, and they're gonna all these sham scam companies are gonna try to give you drugs to make sure that doesn't happen. But they will kill you from acute pancreatitis. So then we can write that on the death certificate. That's a legitimate thing to
Exactly.
write down. Okay, Alan, we will talk next week.
All right. Have a good week, everyone. Keep
Bye
if
bye.
you're
Hopefully,
in
no more.
one of our states, keep warm.
Yes, the single
Take care.
digits here. Bye.